In that New York Times bombshell this week, it was Donald Trump's former White House counsel, Don McGahn, who reportedly was the key person stopping Trump from trying to order the illegal prosecution of his opponents, Hillary Clinton and a key witness in the Mueller probe, James Comey. Now, Bob Mueller would presumably know that, but Donald Trump doesn't know what else McGahn has dished on. As he was leaving the White House, he did clash with Trump, and Trump reportedly blamed him for Mueller's entire appointment. Now, Trump doesn't know what else McGahn has told Bob Mueller, but he was directly involved in nearly every key decision that Mueller is probing. The firing of Mike Flynn, the firing of James Comey, Jeff Sessions' decision not to recuse, which Donald Trump pressed on, these other attempts to fire Bob Mueller, and now add, of course, the new report that Trump wanted to prosecute Clinton and Comey. McGahn is reportedly cooperating extensively, over 30 hours of interviews, and Trump doesn't know what McGahn has told Mueller's team, but everyone agrees McGahn was in the center of everything.
The counsel to the president is a appointed position directly answerable to the president. It is the primary legal advisor to the president.
And that involves you in just about everything?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Hard for you to say I didn't do it.
I'm joined by Michael Conway, a special guest who wrote part of the final report to the U.S. House recommending Richard Nixon's impeachment. Thanks for being here. When you look at this reporting, is the attempted investigation of political enemies, Clinton and Comey, worse than the original Comey firing from a legal perspective, from your vantage point in terms of congressional oversight? And do you think Don McGahn has detailed all of that to Mueller?
Sure. Don McGahn was at ground zero. He's seen all these things firsthand. He's an eyewitness. He'll be Mueller's most important witness. And in this case, there's no privilege. He's not Donald Trump's personal lawyer. He's the White House lawyer. He's the government's lawyer. And he's met with Mueller many times for many hours, as you've indicated, Ari, and there's a good reason for that. If you go back to Watergate, John Dean was a neophyte lawyer. He wasn't an experienced partner like Don McGahn was. He got brought into criminal activity, and when he realized that he was going to be scapegoated, that he was going to be the one who was going to be blamed for the cover-up, he went to the prosecutors. Richard Nixon did his best to keep the prosecutors from hearing Dean's testimony. He talked to Assistant Attorney General Peterson, who was the head of the criminal division, and said, do not give Dean immunity, because he thought if Dean didn't get immunity, Dean wouldn't talk. Dean
Your
didn't
point
get
there
immunity,
is, other than the audio tapes, John Dean, as White House counsel, was one of the most incriminating things against Nixon.
His testimony in the Senate committee was amazing. He had such detail, and he said he wasn't sure at that time it could be corroborated. The tapes came out and corroborated his versions, sometimes verbatim.
So, to that point, McGahn would be potentially the new Dean with the same job. Here was John Dean talking about all this week.
If I had to channel a little of Richard Nixon, I think he'd tell this president he's going too far. This is the sort of stuff of a banana republic. This is what an autocrat does. This is a level that Richard Nixon never went to, where you went after somebody's personal well-being by a criminal prosecution.
Based on your knowledge of how the House interplays with an investigation, what do you think House Democrats should do to preserve the independence of Mueller with regard to all this material, but also eventually get the McGahn material out to the public if you think that's a worthwhile goal?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, they should put a subpoena before to McGahn. He's now a private citizen, but put a subpoena to the White House asking that his notes be preserved, ask that they be turned over. Hopefully Mueller will write a report, but one thing Mueller can do is, assuming that he's not blocked by now acting AG Whitaker, he can release his information to the House Judiciary Committee, which I assume is going to be very interested in knowing about this.
So those 30 hours that we're reporting on are all private right now. You're saying the content, regardless of what Mueller finds vis-a-vis Donald Trump, the content from this White House counsel could go to the House and then go public?
Absolutely. That's the decision that was made by Leon Jaworski, that information about the president should be given to the House, and that they could do that again. Mueller could do that. Mueller could also turn that information over to state prosecutors.
Well, Michael Conway, you know, Sean Diddy Combs always says, I don't got to talk it because I live it. You don't have to talk it because you did live it, but we appreciate you talking about it and giving us some expertise tonight. Well,
I appreciate talking turkey with you.
Talking turkey, and have a good one on that score.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.